You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and the Eagles are officially 1-0 as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 207. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with my buddy Greg Cosell from NFL Films to break down everything we saw from the tape with the Eagles in their win over the division rival Washington Redskins here at Lincoln Financial Field this past Sunday. After that, we will jump ahead to this weekend's matchup, Sunday Night Football. Atlanta Falcons. Feels like these two teams play each other each and every season. Excited to dive into the film with Greg, see what we saw from Atlanta this summer and this past week in week one in their loss to Minnesota. Big matchup here down in Atlanta on Sunday Night Football. Excited to get into that with Greg. And after Chalk Talk, I'm going to get into my scouting report, where this week I'm going to break down one of the most disruptive players on that Atlanta front line, and that's Tack Mckinley, the former first-round pick, a pass rusher out of UCLA. Get into my notes on him coming out of college and talk about just where he's come so far in his career. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get into now our chat about the Eagles' win over Washington. It's time for Chalk Talk with Greg.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Really happy to be joined once again here on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, by none other than NFL Films senior producer Greg Cosell. Greg, welcome to week 2 of the NFL season 2019.
I'm fired up tonight, Fran.
You are. You're a little spicy tonight.
I'm fired up tonight.
Why?
Yeah. Well, we just had a great discussion about a coverage. We'll discuss it.
We'll
discuss that as well. And
but you came in a little hot, which was good.
I know. I don't know why. I'm a little. Maybe it's week 1. I'm fired up.
I'm excited.
I am.
There's a lot to watch. All right. Well, let's get into it. The Eagles look not a great start to the game, but an outstanding finish.
Yes.
They dominated the last 3 quarters, last 2.5 quarters of this football game. And that started with the line of scrimmage to me on both sides of the football. But I think we want to talk a little bit about this pass game first, because we saw, I think a lot of Eagles fans want to hear, all right, what happened with the Eagles? How did they get Desean Jackson going? What happened on some of those big plays? So I feel like that's where I need to start, because that's really where fans want to kind of hear what happened.
Can I just say one thing first, though,
Yes.
before we get to certain plays and the big plays, and everybody is thrilled that Carson Wentz had a big game.
Yep.
What really stood out to me was the play of the offensive line.
They were outstanding.
And in particular, who I thought played really, really well?
Isaac Seumalo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you agree watching the tape?
Yeah, I just wanted I figured it wasn't going to be like a shoe-in.
No. I mean, and it was, I wasn't trying to make you,
You know the play that really stood out to me? The 4th and 1 QB sneak by Carson Wentz. And that's usually like a throwaway play.
Right.
We usually can't see anything.
Which is why I don't remember it real well.
But I'm telling you, Greg, if you go back to that play
Right.
tomorrow, go to the end zone angle, and watch, because if you got it from behind the Eagles, you can see the pad level from Isaac when he strikes Payne. He gets up under his pads, and Payne is like kind of Joe Greenish, like corkscrewed in the A gap. Gets under his pads, runs his feet, and puts him 3 yards into the backfield.
I'll take a quick peek tomorrow.
To me, that was one of the best plays of Isaac's career. He had a good game.
Seumalo, and I'm thinking pass protection more than anything right now.
He held up well against Payne.
I thought he did a really good job. I thought Peters played really well.
Yep.
And Lane Johnson, I thought, had a really good game, especially when he was matched up against Ryan Kerrigan, who, over the last couple of years, has at times given Lane some problems.
Yep.
He's given a lot of...
Especially early in his career.
Right.
Yeah,
He's given a lot of right tackles problems. But I thought that he did a really good job. So overall, I thought the O-line did a really, really good job in pass protection.
Yeah, and while we're talking about them, the offensive line in the run game. I mean, when you get into the opening drive of the third quarter, and you get some of those big runs. I mean, some giant holes up front. The Darren Sproles, I want to say 17-yarder. We had the little spin move at the end, followed by Sanders on the back end of that. Just outstanding blocking, not just by the O-line, by the tight ends as well.
And by the way, how good for a rookie is Miles Sanders in pass protection?
A couple of really good
both
reps,
in terms of recognition and in execution.
I'm glad you said that.
I mean, he is fearless. He steps up. There was only one play where I thought he might not have recognized it, but I'm not 100%. You can sit and watch those plays 10 times, and because you don't exactly know the protection call, you have to try to keep walking through it. So I may be wrong. Maybe he didn't make a mistake. It didn't turn out to be a problem on the play. But there were 5 or 6 plays where he just stepped up and he just nailed a blitzing linebacker, and he is fearless. He's willing. And his technique is, I mean, look, you can always improve technique, but he sticks his, he's the old, stick his shoulder in there, and
stick his face in the fan. To me, like if I were to create like a pie chart for what it takes for a running back to be good in pass pro, it's like 45% willingness, 45% awareness, and then that last 10% is technique.
Right.
And we'll throw strength in with the willingness. To me, like he showed the 90% you need. The technique can get a little bit better, but he didn't need it in this guy. To me, like those 2 reps were really, really impressive.
And like I said, there were 4 or 5 of them. It wasn't just one.
And that wasn't an area necessarily where we saw a lot of him in Penn State.
No.
That wasn't an area where I was like, oh man, like this kid's really good in pass.
But he did it in the preseason too.
He did.
That's
that Greg Ward touchdown against Jacksonville was a big play.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that is such a positive about his game. And I thought he showed some electricity in his running as well.
He did.
He's got some juice to him.
That run that you're referencing after that got them into the red zone, he showed it wasn't just that initial burst to get up through the line. It was that secondary cut at the second level where he got away from the safety. He had like a secondary burst there, which I thought was really impressive.
He also had a burst on a run that may have been just 8 or 9 yards.
The one they
on
took
the right.
outside to the right. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you just saw,
I'm
there was
using that in the shot.
There was that moment where you just went, wow.
Yeah.
That was there was a little giddy up there.
Yeah. He's got another gear.
Yeah, he sure does.
To me, like I almost look at it with pass rushers, right? Like, everyone wants to know, all right, who are the pass rushers coming out of college that are going to be productive in the NFL? If you're a 3-down player, you've got more opportunities to be productive.
Right.
When you look at a running back, if you can block, you're on the field on 3rd down, you've got more of an opportunity to be productive. Right. So that really, if he can be a pass protector, that gets him on the field more. Now it's not just always a one-trick pony pass catcher, or he can be an early downs running back. Now you've got the ability to be a 3-down player.
They've got a nice little deal here, and a nice little problem. Let's put it that way, with Sproles, with Jordan Howard, who I thought ran well.
Yeah, he did.
And with Miles Sanders.
The 3, I actually was thinking about this because I went back and I probably watched the offensive film like 7 times today, and sorted all the runs by gain. I'm like, all right, let's watch all the big runs. And it was like, okay, 1 big run by Howard, 1 big run by Sanders, 1 big run by Sproles. Like, all right, the 3 best runs were from each back. I think that speaks to what we're talking about, and that a lot goes to the offensive line as well.
Without question.
All right, well, let's get into the pass game.
Okay.
Because some big plays, obviously, namely from Desean Jackson.
On 3rd down.
On third. Well, they were excellent on 3rd down. To me, that's a number one. It's going to be a big topic on Eagles game plan this week. Spoiler alert for later in the week in the show, and it's the subject of my column this week in Eagle Eye in the Sky to start.
Just before we get to the 2 50-yard touchdowns, you know what 3rd down play I really liked? I'm pretty sure this was a 3rd down play. I mean, I've watched so much tape
today. Is this the opposite hash throw?
It's the one where Jackson went in motion across the formation.
Oh yeah, it was a great one. It was early. Yeah, it was early in the game.
Not super early.
Not super early, but the one where he came across. Alshon ran the clear out, and he ran into the flat. It was like 3rd and medium, 3rd and short.
No, this was like a 19-yarder. I think it was later.
I don't know if this was
I don't know if I
put
it in my notes.
I
might not have. So
so Desean Jackson had 6 catches on 3rd down.
Right.
And 5 of them went for 1st downs. 2 of them were the touchdowns.
There was one where he went in motion across the formation from the left side of the formation across to the right.
Okay.
And he ended up catching it at the sideline on the right. And actually, Carson had a little pressure on him. I forget who. Someone got pushed back into him, and he had to make the throw. But he caught it on the right sideline. I think it was 19 yards.
You're right. And Sanders was the one who made the block right in front of him. There was the defender right in his lap.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Yes, I believe that was 3rd down.
I think that was 3rd down.
That was actually one of my favorite plays because, see, the thing with Jackson is if you get him free access, and that's what the Eagles will do, the way they line up formationally, whether it's bunch stuff, whether they use him in motion like that across the formation. That's why I really like that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the 50-yarders we're going to get to right now, and those were big plays, obviously. But that was just an example to me of just little things that make for important plays.
Well, explain what free access is for the listeners that don't know what that is.
That's when your receiver can run off the line of scrimmage without any form of press whatsoever.
Yep.
And when you have an explosive receiver like a Desean Jackson who can get up to speed within just 1 or 2 steps, you want him to be able to get off the line of scrimmage without any impediment, without anybody in front of him.
Yep.
And what happens there then is if a corner is then playing with a cushion, what happens is he starts to turn because he does not want to get beat over the top. And once he turns his body, you've got him beat.
Yeah, now you're talking about getting, if he turns outside, you work inside. You turn him out inside, you work outside. To me, the Eagles did such a great job of moving him around, and he was used in the slot so well. We saw so much use of the 3-by-1 sets. You've coined that term. You and Ron Jaworski, the receiver distribution and location.
Right.
I thought it was excellent. And if you could just quickly describe to our listeners what that means and why it's so important for this offense, because I thought they really took advantage of it in this game.
What receiver distribution and location means is it's the number of receivers to each side of the formation.
Yep. So 3-by-1, 2-by-2.
Right.
However the receivers are.
And then what the Eagles also do is something we call 1-by-3.
Yep.
It's still 3 receivers to one side,
yeah.
but the single receiver is the tight end.
Yep.
And the Eagles do a ton of that. Normally it's Zach Ertz. I think as the season progresses, you'll see Goddard in that role more. Mm-hmm. But normally it's Zach Ertz. And see, then if you're in that situation, what often happens to that single receiver side, which is 99.9% of the time to the boundary, the back is also to that side.
Right.
So if you have Desean Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar trips to the field, and Ertz and let's say Sproles to the boundary side, you put the defense in a little bit of a problem because there's a lot to work with to the trip side, and then you may get single coverage on the backside, and it's single coverage versus Ertz and or Goddard and maybe Sproles.
Yep.
And Sproles is obviously very, very good versus single coverage.
Yeah, and so what would happen in this game was, the Eagles would line up in 3-by-1, and they would have Ertz as the X-ISO receiver on the backside. And the Redskins, they're not a team that typically travels their corners in terms of.
They did a bit with Norman in this game on Jeffrey.
They did a little bit, and especially a little bit later, I thought, because what would happen is, I believe it was the first drive after that second Desean touchdown. Okay, so and we'll talk about the plays in a bit, but after Desean, he gets free down the side. The next time they went 3-by-1, Landon Collins was out in man coverage on Zach Ertz, and they said we're putting our corners on the receivers. We're not messing around anymore with this. But just what they're able to do when they line up that way can help dictate matchups. We saw it, to me, on 3 of those big touchdowns in this game.
Right. No, you're exactly right. That's why you do all that stuff.
Yes. All right, so let's get into the very first one. Mm-hmm. And this was the play that we had our offline conversation about in terms of what that coverage was. I felt pretty good about what the coverage was, as exotic as it was. And
now, did you think you knew the second you saw it?
No, it took me some time. I sat here in the studio while we're watching the game, and we had the All-22, and I'm watching, and I'm yelling at Robbie, our producer, for game day. I said, play it back. All right, pause it. All right, play it back. Because the more I'm trying to get a sense of where these guys are going.
Here was my issue with it, okay? And again, it's 3rd and 10.
Yes.
Okay. You and I have watched the Eagles now for a long time. I mean, since certainly every play since Doug's been here. All right? A staple route concept for the Eagles on 3rd and long is what we call dagger. Okay, and the way the Eagles normally run it is the inside receiver runs the vertical route. It could be a straight 9 route. It could be a post route. It could be a deep over route.
Yep.
Okay, that's
some kind of clear out route to clear up space in the middle of the field.
A vertical route.
Yes.
And the outside receiver then runs a dig.
So a deep in cut. Right into that void in the middle of the field.
Right. Some call it a 96 combination because it basically began with a straight vertical, which is a go, and a deep dig route or in route, which is a 6 route.
Yep.
Okay, so it's a dagger or a 96. Okay, so that's a staple for the Eagles on 3rd and long, and this was 3rd and 10. So the guy who was running the vertical route was Desean Jackson. Now, I don't profess to know a lot, but there's one thing I know. He's pretty fast.
He is fast, some would say. Yeah.
He's pretty fast.
Yep.
And he's been pretty fast for a long time. It's not a surprise.
Right.
So he ran the vertical route. Now, the Redskins were in a coverage because he was actually the inside receiver, where if he runs vertically, the corner was going to be playing him with outside leverage. Okay.
Correct, because he's trying to play inside. So he's playing outside the receiver to funnel the receiver inside. To his quote-unquote help.
Right.
Right, in the middle of the field.
There's no way that an outside corner, maybe there's 1 or 2 in the league who can do this, playing outside leverage, is going to get on top of Desean Jackson on a deep post.
Not many, no.
No, okay? And certainly not any corner the Redskins have.
That's correct.
All right? So that brings me to what the coverage is, which, because essentially what we saw was John Bostic trying to get to the deep middle of the field. Now, for those who may not remember from yesterday, sometimes I forget things.
Yep.
John Bostic is a linebacker.
He is a linebacker.
And he
was a fast linebacker, but he's still a linebacker.
He started down lower.
Right, close to he was close to mugging. Like, he was close to line of scrimmage.
So John Bostic was not going to get to the deep middle as essentially a post safety. He'd still not be getting there from yesterday. He's certainly not going to get there to defend
not beating
Desean Jackson there. So I understand probabilities, tendencies. That's what football is a game of. And I understand analytics, and people work off that. And maybe their studies said that some high percentage of the time they throw the dig. But you're giving up Desean Jackson running to the post. You're giving that up.
Well, let's tell them what they were. So Bostic was running to the post, and the reason why he was running to the post was before the snap, the Redskins had showed a too high shell. So they had both their safeties about 13 yards off the ball, split off just outside the hash.
So
on
it looked
like
a split safety coverage.
Looked like it could be cover 2 or cover 4, some kind of middle of the field open coverage. And at the snap of the ball, so before the snap, Carson's like, all right, we've got dagger, middle of the field's open. This is going to Alshon. This is going to be a
running
deep
the
dig for a first round or for a first down, automatic.
Right.
Ball snapped. Coverage
the safeties
changes.
Drop down.
He sees the safeties drop. That depth changes. That's green light go over the top.
Right.
That's what he's reading.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm fine, and not that anybody cares what I think, but I'm fine with the idea of disguised coverage.
Yeah.
More and more teams are doing that now. It's things you have to do in this NFL today to match up to offenses that are far more multiple and that do a lot in terms of formation and use of personnel.
Yeah.
So the concept of disguise is wonderful. But in this particular coverage, what you're getting to, you cannot cover Desean Jackson going vertical.
Yep.
So I guess my point is, and like I said, hey, I'm just a guy with a clicker sitting there watching a play 20 times. Greg Minuski's going to go
20?
into...
Might have been more.
Yeah, it might have been more in this one. Greg Minuski's going into Jay Gruden after the game or Monday morning when they convene and basically saying, hey, that was our coverage. No problem. We gave up a 51-yard touchdown to Desean. No problem. That was just part of the coverage. Is that really what they're going to say?
I think so. Because honestly, and look, we talked about it last week, and I thought it was a great point by you. I brought up that all through the summer, I'd seen Washington do a little bit more disguise with their coverage, showing one thing pre-snap, moving into a post-snap. And you said, look, I expect more teams to do it this fall. And I think that they did it. And they got caught. When you just I think they're...
If it was an inverted cover 3, which is basically what we're saying that we think it is, if it's an inverted cover 3, what they gave up in that coverage was Desean Jackson going to the post.
Yep.
That's what they gave up. That's why I'm struggling with it conceptually.
Yes.
That could be the coverage.
Right.
But that's why I'm struggling with it conceptually.
Yeah, it was a tough go for Washington.
Anyway,
it was a fun play to break down.
That fired me up.
Did you guys had lots of debates about that?
We had lots of debates in our matchup room today about that. And
what was the presiding thought?
We never really came to a definitive point of view just because we couldn't wrap our head around the fact that what they'd be giving up was Desean Jackson to the deep post.
Right. The thing about it that
does that make sense though?
What gave me a little bit of pause about it though was that Zach Brown, but when John Bostic had sprinted to the post, he saw Alshon and he throttled down a little bit. I was like, well, that's what the safeties are for. You got to get on your horse.
Or he said, I'm not getting there anyway.
Let me give this a shot. But all right, well, let's get to the second one. Because the second one was a different kind of read by Carson Wentz. This one was a post-snap read, an outstanding post-snap read by Carson Wentz. Great ball, great catch. This one was a pre-snap read. He goes up to the line of scrimmage. He changes things up. I don't know. I'm not positive on what they saw. A lot of the players talked afterwards that, they showed us a pre-snap look, and that was
what did you think the coverage was when all was said and done?
So I'm not sure what it was from a coverage call standpoint. To me, what I saw was the kind of going back to the receiver distribution location. I saw a corner over Ertz on the outside. They felt like they had zone. We're going to attack that zone with 2 vertical routes. We're going to attack that safety on the near hash with 2 vertical routes. He can't cover both.
Right, because to me it had a cover 4 look to it.
Yeah, so we're going to attack that safety on the near hash.
So what they did is, again, they had Jackson and Aguilar, kind of ran that sort of cross-country, over route, because essentially it became 2-on-1 on Monte Nicholson.
He had no shot. He wasn't in position to play either.
Well, and also Carson did a really nice job initially of moving him to Carson's left, Nicholson's right, so that he could then make the throw to Desean.
Yep.
But it looked like cover 4 to me.
Yeah, so not really a busted coverage.
No.
It was the Eagles found the way they knew the coverage and they beat the coverage. And
every
coverage can get beat, as we know.
Right. Well, any zone coverage can get beat, obviously.
Especially if you have a linebacker playing in the post.
Yeah, but I mean, and then it was up to Carson. As good quarterbacks have to be able to manipulate and move back end safeties, and he did a really nice job. And it's funny when you watch the end zone angle, which is a great angle of it.
Yeah.
All you have to do is move him for a step.
That's it.
That's the way the NFL works.
Yep.
You don't have to move him 5 steps.
Sure.
Literally, Nicholson just took I think a step.
Yep.
And that was enough for the throw to be made.
Yeah, and then it was outstanding throw and catch. Did a great job leading them up the numbers.
Yep.
Great job tracking the ball over the shoulder by Desean. So yeah, 2 big plays.
Yep.
Let me ask you about the Alshon touchdown real quick, and then we'll move over to the defensive side.
Which one?
The first one, the touchdown catch, not the touchdown run, as it went down in the playbook on that screen pass. So, again, another example, receiver distribution location.
Right.
12 personnel in the low red zone. I believe it was right around the 10-yard line. You had Zach Ertz as the lone receiver to the one side. You had a 3-by-1 bunch set to the other side. Alshon, the point man in the bunch. You had Goddard on his right. You had Desean on his left. Desean not a part of the play. The Redskins had just substituted. There was an injury to DRC, so Greg Stroman, the young corner, steps
in. That's right.
Landon
it might have been the
Collins,
only play he played.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
Landon Collins is trying to get him lined up.
Right.
I don't think it mattered because it seemed to me, Greg, and tell me if I'm wrong, it seemed like they had a banjo call set up, so basically an in-and-out coverage where Alshon's running
They're playing
inside.
the release.
Yeah, so whoever runs inside, the linebacker's got him.
Release.
Whoever goes outside, safety's got
Right.
him. Alshon goes inside. He's matched up on a linebacker. Off the scramble, there was an easy matchup to take advantage of.
Yeah, but I think we can't overlook the fact that the coverage was pretty good. The throw was ridiculous.
The throw was stupid
and when
good.
you see it from
really
the end zone, and again, I know different end teams sometimes.
Yeah.
I saw it from behind Carson.
Yes.
I don't know how you're.
Yeah, I think for the one that goes to NFL, to be spread out, so the ones that'll be out on Game Pass will be from behind the home team.
Which is what I saw.
Which is what you saw. Which is what I saw as well.
Okay. Which, I think the throw was because, when you see the play, first of all, plays like that happen so fast.
Yep.
When he threw it, you almost you weren't sure that Alshon caught it for a second because you just couldn't see it.
Threaded the needle.
Right. But then when you see it from that end zone look, and first of all, there's hands that he has to get the ball through.
Right.
And he had to lead him. I mean, he's running to his right, and he has to lead him perfectly. There's no margin for error on a throw like that.
Yep.
It was a ridiculous throw.
So the replay on TV, they showed it from the podium angle from behind.
Right.
So it was the same thing except down on the ground. The podium is the cameras that are up in the end zone, up on those platforms. And when Carson releases it, Alshon's not in the shot.
No,
you don't
I know.
see him.
That's the thing.
So it was an awesome throw.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
Right in the back of the end zone, right in the bread basket. All right. Anything else offensively? Before we move on?
We kind of we had a little fun with that. Yeah.
All right. So let's get over to the defensive side. Can I tell you one player that really stood out to me? Dirk Burnett. A couple of really impressive hustle plays.
Well, it's funny you say that.
And a couple of really good rushes. I know he didn't get home for a sack and everything, but he had a couple of rushes that we didn't know were necessarily in his toolbox.
Right. I said the two Eagles, this was after I'd watched the first half, I said the two defenders who flashed in the first half were Burnett and McLeod. Burnett with his pursuit motor and range, and McLeod with his ability to play post safety in the box. Also a first half snap in which he matched up man-to-man an inside slot Quinn to trips.
There you go. And he was really physical coming downhill too.
I
had a
thought
couple
he
nice
was
smacks.
real, and I think they're using him with a little more versatility than before he got injured.
Yeah, so he was purely a post guy before.
Pretty much. I mean, it was rare. If he was down very often, it was pretty certain he would blitz.
Yeah, right.
Right. But yeah, I thought Barnett stood out. If I could say this, I thought that the Eagles' pass rush was very uneven in this game.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
I think that their four-man D-line rush has to be better as the season progresses. There were a couple of coverage issues. Again, I'm not sure exactly what happened on the McLaurin touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, I think
there was no deep safety.
I think they were playing. I think that you're going to see this around the league. I think with all the in-breakers that we've seen around the league, I think teams are going to put more stress, put more importance on trying to stop those. And I think that's looking around the league. I think I don't want to take this term. Ben Fennell has been saying this for the last few weeks. He thinks 2019 will be the return of the deep post as the play of choice for most teams.
And then they got lucky on the one that Keenum overthrew.
Yep.
Which I believe, and I could be wrong, but I think Darby had to overlap that from the backside.
Yeah, I'd want to go back and look at it.
I don't want to.
Yeah, sure, right.
It's not a rip. I'm just talking
of course,
football.
Yeah, no,
so I don't know 100%, but I think, based on my understanding of the coverage.
So overlap meaning both guys.
He's the left corner.
Yes.
Okay. McLaren was on the left side of the formation, the right
against
side
the right corner. Yep.
Against the right corner. So he ran to the post, I believe, against Sidney Jones because Sidney played the second half.
Right, on that play you're talking about. Yes.
He played right corner in the second half.
Yep.
And he was playing with outside leverage as if it was his own concept. And what happened was there was a motion across the formation, and I believe on this play, if memory serves me correctly, that Malcolm was initially the deep safety, and he dropped down to deal with that either jet or orbit motion.
Something there, yep.
Okay? And I think when he dropped down, you saw him sort of wave his arm too, because the guy who went in motion was who Darby was over.
Yep.
I think Darby had to replace.
Yep.
I'm
Has to get up
almost
over the
sure.
top.
I think he had to get over the top to overlap any post route, any deep route. So I think that he was, because as the play sort of happened, I think he kind of went, uh-oh. But like I said, I don't want to,
Sure. So
I could be wrong, but I think I'm right.
It can always be I'm talking from a defensive standpoint, can always be tricky with that jet action because of that. I mean, we've seen not just the Eagles, a lot of teams get beat on similar kinds of plays where, when you have those jet sweeps, the receivers cross the formation, responsibilities change in the secondary.
Without question.
And then not even for the secondary. Defensive front, run fits, and everything changes.
Yeah.
So,
and you're seeing more and more of that in the league.
Yes.
And you just made that point that I think that really puts a premium on secondary adjustment, and it's adjustment like that because the ball could be snapped at any time.
Yep.
And rules change because without going into a long deal, the way zone coverages work, or even match zones, is that you're responsible for a particular receiver. It's almost based on number. Like there's a number one receiver, he's the furthermost outside. A number two receiver, you start working inside. A number three receiver, who could be the back, depending on the formation. And in match zone, someone's responsible for one, someone's responsible for two, someone's responsible for three.
Yep.
If that changes offensively, you have to change in a split second as to, hey, I initially had three, but now I have two, or I had one, but now, all that stuff can change.
Sure. Yeah, it's something that's why, we talked about it here on a daily basis in the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast during training camp. The Eagles practice it a lot. Every team in the NFL, you have to practice it a lot from a communication standpoint.
You have to.
It's a big thing in the NFL today. The big news really coming out of Monday, Malik Jackson. A significant injury, a foot injury.
Yeah,
we'll see how long. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what they decide to do.
They've got a deep unit, though. They literally played almost two distinct D-line groups.
Yep.
I wonder who'll take his spot in sort of in the first unit D-line.
I guess to be Ridgeway, Jernigan will step up into the start. But I'll tell you what, Ridgeway played a lot of snaps.
He did.
And Ridgeway flashed. He's a guy you and I both liked early in his career at Texas. And
he's got some athleticism to him.
No
he's
doubt.
Not Malik Jackson, but he's got some athleticism to him. See, the thing that really stood out, and it's a shame about Malik Jackson, is they really have three guys, Cox, Graham, and Jackson, who are really position versatile when they go to their sub fronts.
Yep. And I wonder, will we see more Vinny inside?
And he's also position versatile.
He's got that as well.
Yeah.
Will we see more BG inside? Will we see more Vinny inside? Does that mean increased snaps for a Josh Sweat, who I thought, what did he play? I think he played 10 snaps on defense. He had a couple nice rushes as well. To me, there was all the hype and the hoopla about Josh Sweat in the summer, and I cautioned. I was like, all right, well, pump the brakes a little bit. Like, we're not saying he's one of the best pass rushers. He's this guy or that guy, right now.
Right.
All we need is, hey, come off the bench, have a couple of really nice active snaps
a game. 20 snaps. And
that's what you want for a guy in his second year.
Particularly with who they have.
Exactly. And I thought that he did that.
He's not going to beat out Dirk Burnett or Brandon Graham.
Right, yeah.
And they're good players.
Yes, exactly.
And by the way, they were both first-round picks.
Right. To me, I was impressed with what I saw from Josh Sweat on Sunday against Washington. So, it would say to me.
I was also, pleased because I've always been a fan going back to his his Minnesota years that they played a ton of dime, and Sendejo was the dime player.
Yes.
And by the way, you talk about versatility. I think now we're seeing a ton of versatility with those three safeties and dime.
Yes.
Jenkins, McLeod, and Sendejo all being asked to do multiple things, including play man coverage on tight ends.
Yep.
And Jenkins can certainly play man coverage on slot receivers if need be as well. We saw McLeod have a snap of that. We actually saw Sendejo. I think it was Thompson he matched up to on one play.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
So, I mean, we're seeing a lot of versatility with those three safeties and how they can be deployed in their dime sub-package.
And what does that mean for you from a game plan perspective? It's tough to be – you're not predictable as a defense.
Well, it means that you can't go into a game and say, here's the matchup we want to exploit.
Yeah. Because
you don't know if you'll get that matchup.
Right. That's good. Yeah, that's a good point. And then I would say to go on the other side of it against the run, and we'll kind of wrap it up after this from this game. I thought that the run defense was outstanding.
Oh, it was great.
I mean, that's, what was it, 29 yards rushing total for the Redskins.
There was one play where I forget it might have been the left guard or I think it was Flowers.
Okay.
When Brandon Graham
just
jacked him up.
So it was like a tackle trap play where a guard. It
was either power or I forget the exact.
They brought Flowers over, and he got stonewalled by BG.
And it was almost like a secondary reaction.
Yeah.
Like Graham hit him, and you thought, okay. And then all of a sudden, like a half a beat later, Flowers.
It was like an aftershock. After an earthquake.
So you know the play I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, like, Brandon Graham, there was no sacks, no QB hits, I don't think.
Right.
But he flashed against the run multiple times.
Yeah.
He sniffed out that screen.
Right.
He had a couple hustle plays.
He did a great job on that screen. I know the player you're talking about.
This is Brandon Graham. This is Brandon Graham.
He'll get his sacks.
Yeah, they will come.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to this weekend's matchup because an interesting one. It feels like these two teams play every year with Atlanta, and it was tough.
I think we have to
week
be a little careful about Atlanta with the week one game for a number of reasons.
Tell us why.
Let's start defensively.
With their defense.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that defensive approach, and we don't know this for a fact.
Yes.
We know nothing for a fact after 1 week.
Correct.
Other than all the definitive judgments I heard on a
Other
number.
than John Bostic can't play free safety.
Well, that I feel good about.
Okay.
Right. But of course, after week one, we've now made definitive judgments on everything.
Well, of course, yeah.
Right, because that's what we do.
Yeah.
But I was watching the tape of the Falcons defense and the Vikings offense.
Yep.
And as I was watching it, I'm thinking, are they playing the way they're playing with all these odd fronts, this 5 across bare front with a 0 technique and 2-3 techniques because of who they were playing against? Because the Vikings, now they did have some of those fronts against 11 personnel, not many, but the Vikings played a ton with 21 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. They're a downhill running football team.
I actually think because they did a lot in the summer.
Right.
In preseason,
so
they did a lot of it.
I don't know the answer to this.
Right.
But that's not, the Eagles' run game will not be exactly like that.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll do as much in terms of like a pure bear front, but they've been doing a lot of those
of bear.
They've been doing a lot of those odd looks with with both tack. Because here's the thing: is like. Vic Beasley, ever since he came into the league, first he's a DN, then they moved him to linebacker, then he's back at DN, now he's back at linebacker, and they list him as the Sam backer.
Right.
To me, I look at these fronts, and I'm like, they're in an odd front. Your DNs are Jarrett and Bailey.
Right.
Your nose tackle's Davison. You're standing up McKinley and Beasley.
Right.
Beasley's rushing off the open side, and McKinley's lining up to the Sam side. To me, I look at it, I'm like, this is an odd front. This is a 3-4 front.
In theory, yes.
In terms of like how the guys are distributed or across the line
it's
scrimmage.
It's a 3-4 in terms of guys with their hand on the ground, but they weren't lined up in the way old people like me think of a 3-4 where they're two gapping.
No,
because
they're not two gapping.
The only guy who was really head up was the nose.
Was Davison,
and the other two D tackles / DNs, whatever you want to call them, were gap players.
Yes. Which,
we've seen
we've seen plenty of one gap 3-4 teams.
They could, maybe this is something they've evolved into and they want to play this way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams that are playing a lot more, Fran, because I see a ton of the league
more of it, right?
that are lining up now with these 5 across bare front looks. The Patriots have been doing it for years.
Right.
But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel certain saying that, hey, this is what we're going to get. But put that aside for a minute. I think there's a number of matchups here that the Eagles can exploit in this game.
What do you like? What do you like here?
I kind of like who's ever in the slot against DeMonte Kazee.
Okay. Yeah, because KZ hadn't done much in the preseason from a play standpoint. Chris Cooper had lined up in the slot for them, and I didn't know much about Chris Cooper, but they lost Brian Poole in free agency.
Right.
I said, all right, well, KZ had played some safety for them last year after
he
Neal
replaced
went down.
Ricardo Allen after he went down.
Exactly. So,
now, KZ was an outside corner in college.
A really productive one.
But most people thought he wouldn't be an outside corner in the NFL.
I was one of them.
Right. So he ended up
he's a good
being
player.
Safety, and now he's in the slot. I'm just wondering, you put Desean in the slot, even Aguilar in the slot. I feel pretty good about that matchup for the Eagles, assuming they played a lot of man coverage out of the Bear front, which killed him in the run game, by the way, because what would happen is you lose a lot of run support when that tight end who has a linebacker right over him just releases forward, and that linebacker has to leave his run support. So they got burned a lot. Again, I don't know if this was all specific to Minnesota or if that's what we're going to see this week against the Eagles. I just don't know. But I don't see them as playing that much man, and I really don't think they will against the Eagles. But like I said, it's week 1. You don't know. There's no trends yet. We don't have a large enough sample size to say, or I don't believe so, that this is what the Falcons will do.
To me, I went in, just coming into the season, I don't rely too much on preseason film except for the teams that either are breaking in new staffs,
right,
or if they're in the first, we'll say 2 or 3 weeks. I know some teams will do up to 4 weeks in their preparation for preseason. The first 4 teams they play in the regular season, they'll look at their preseason stuff. I really wanted to look at Atlanta because I said, all right, I know that they were trying some different things from a defensive standpoint. And they were working in a lot of those different fronts in the summer. And that was, I pulled a bunch of those plays for use for Eagle Eye and for game plan and things like that.
You're not necessarily wrong. There's no right or wrong right here.
I'm interested to see how they play it. I'm very interested to see how they play
because they were, in the years Dan Quinn's been there, 3 now maybe. Was the Super Bowl his first year?
I forget if it was his first or second.
Well, whatever.
But
3 or 4
either
years.
way, I mean, they had an identity.
They've been a 4-3 front.
Yes.
4-3, 1 gap front. That's what they've been.
Cover 3
and
cover on the back
3.
end.
And then they played a lot of cover 1 as well.
Right.
They've morphed
Single
into
high,
playing more of that, but they've been a single high defense.
Yeah,
clearly.
That's been their identity. And we're going to play fast, and we're going to run to the football. We're going to be violent and
That's
urgent.
why they drafted a guy like Desean Jones, who some might see as a little undersized, but he fits exactly what they do.
Yeah. Who's the best player on that defense in your mind right now?
I think they have 3 really good players at all 3 levels. I think Grady Jarrett's really good.
Yep.
I think Jones is solid.
Yep.
I think Keanu O'Neal is very good at what he does.
And he's coming off the knee, too, which is tough.
I've always liked Devondre Campbell, too.
Yeah.
More than maybe most. Yep. I think he's a really good player.
And he's a versatile player, for sure.
They've got 2 questions in the secondary right now. They've got Oliver, who's a second-round pick from Colorado.
Second-year guy.
A lot of people liked. I thought he had a real shot to be a good pro, but he's obviously starting for the first time.
Yep.
And Kazee, in the slot. He's a new slot corner. So it's a different position than he's played before.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Let me ask you this one question, and we'll move off from this defense. What are the advantages? Why would they want to play that Bear front against the what are the advantages of that Bear front for a defensive front? What do they get out of it by lining up that way?
Well, it's not just the Bear front. It's the 5 across with sort of the wide stand-up players.
So anytime we say Bear, it's really if the guard, center guard are all covered up. So meaning there's a line across from them.
Yeah.
But so we're talking about 5 over 5. What does that do?
But
for
normally
you from a
the 2
standpoint?
outside guys are pretty wide.
Yep.
So what you're trying to do is you're trying to control the inside, muddy up the inside, but you also, because of those 2 outside guys, theoretically can set the edge. It's hard to get around those outside guys. Theoretically on the blackboard.
Yes.
Okay, now it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
And I thought McKinley had a couple of bad snaps in this game where he came too hard inside or straight up the field and gave up the edge.
Yep.
And when you play the Eagles, that's a big deal because we know a lot of the Eagles' run game is out of shotgun and it's out that outside zone, and you can't give up the edge.
One quick side note, I thought Minnesota really blocked their butts off in this game. Offensive line, tight ends, I thought they were really impressive watching them on film. We played Minnesota in a few weeks, so I kind of earmarked that for down the road.
Now, again, just as an aside, and we'll discuss this when we get to Minnesota, I think that's the way Mike Zimmer wants to play. Now you're not going to every week your quarterback's not throwing 10 balls.
That's unrealistic.
That's what they want their identity to be.
You wonder what his reaction will be when he has to throw 27 times in 2 weeks.
Or 11 times.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, well, let's get over to Atlanta's offense. This was a tough one because...
Yeah, and I think you have to be a little careful about this too.
Yeah, new system.
I think we have to talk more about what they are and want to be, as opposed to just what happened in this game.
Okay, so what do they want to be?
I think they want...
Because Dirk Cutter now is the new OC.
And Dirk Cutter's been there before.
Yes, he was.
Okay, I think they want to be a one back, run the ball team.
Yep.
With the play action pass game and working the middle of the field. And again, none of this is 100%.
Yeah.
But working the middle of the field with their route concepts, getting behind second-level players, ideally linebackers, who are, dealing with their run fits in the run game.
Yep.
I think that's what they'd like to be.
You saw a little bit of that in this game.
Right.
Yep.
Right. But I think, look, Matt Ryan threw 2 picks. He threw 7 all of last year. He had a bad game, and the 2 picks were bad.
And they had a fumble in the red zone as well.
Correct. So, like I said, there's only 16 games, so you don't dismiss it and say it doesn't matter. But this is not – they're going to be playing at home. It's Sunday night football. Emotion does matter in football. This will not be an easy week of practice down in Falcon Land.
Yep.
They're not a terrible team. They've got good players. They've lost their rookie right guard, Chris Lindstrom, so it's going to be Wes Schweitzer, who I believe played last year.
No, they did say Jamon Brown will step in at right guard.
Jamon Brown.
Jamon Brown will step in.
Okay, and he started numerous games in the league.
Yep.
So, I don't think their offense will be any different.
Right.
They'll be prepared to play what they would view as Falcon offense.
Yep.
So I think this is a case where the Eagles, their pass rush has to be ready. They've got to play with tremendous discipline, because if you hit guys like Ridley and Jones with in-breaking routes on the move, and they have run after catch, it's a tough deal.
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, it's a team that there's a definite identity, and you highlighted it. They want to be able to run the football, and then they're going to work off of that in terms of the play-action pass game, attack the intermediate area, attack the deep area. Dirk Cutter's a coach that wants to be able to push it, when they can. Look,
he's not a dink and dunk kind of offensive coordinator.
No, and they did do it a little bit in this game. I think just kind of build into a little bit of a rhythm, but you start to see in the second half some of those concepts really kind of come to the top.
And I think the other thing, too, the first game of the season, you're so jacked up. You've been game planning for this literally since the schedule came out, because I've talked to coaches, and that's what they do. And then all of a sudden, before you can blink, you're losing 7-0.
Right.
And not that 7-0 is, but it's just there's a mindset that all of a sudden you're preparing, you're down 7-0, and it just, the game feels different right away.
Yep.
That's why the Eagles win was so impressive, because they came back in a situation where Carson Wentz had not taken a snap in a preseason game, and they came back.
Yep.
Because they were down, what was it, 17-3?
17-0.
17-0.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, because the first Jackson made it 17-7.
Yep.
But so, I think we know what the Falcons' offense is, what it probably will be as the season progresses, whether it gets to that Sunday night. Obviously, if you're an Eagles fan, you hope it doesn't quite get to that, but it wouldn't surprise me if they come out and they're really sharp on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I think the Eagles secondary is a spot that, I don't want to say it's a question mark. That'd be too negative.
Right.
But I think if all goes well for an offense, I think the Eagles secondary really has to play well.
I mean, take us back to week 2. Literally a year ago this week, the Eagles went down to Tampa Bay to play the Dirk Cutter offense, and they worked us. I mean, they basically had their pick in the pass game. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick, they had Desean Jackson, but you got Julio Jones, you got Calvin Ridley, you got Mohamed Sanu. Austin Hooper's
a good tight end.
I wasn't a big fan of Hooper coming out. This summer has been the best that he's looked, and I think he caught 7 balls the other night too.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to this is a little bit of a be careful game, particularly early, because the last thing you want to do on the road is all of us, you don't want to be down 17-0 in Atlanta.
Yeah. I will say the big thing that Minnesota had going, they got after Ryan. I mean, they
sure did.
They own the trenches defensively.
Right. Well, that's why the Eagles pass rush,
in this yep.
To my way of thinking, is going to have to be a little more disruptive consistently than it was this past week. Because for the most part, I mean, there were some really good rushes. And I think you mentioned Dirk Burnett. I think he had a really good rush against Donald Penn, as I recall.
He had a couple good ones against him,
because he switched sides a couple of times, too. He worked on the right side, on the left side. But I think they're going to have to be a little more consistently disruptive, because Matt Ryan is a quarterback who's at his best when he can step into throws.
Right, yep.
So you don't necessarily have to sack him, but you have to muddy that pocket so he can't really step into his throws.
Sure. It's going to be an interesting matchup. And, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You can't go in, as you're an Eagles fan, you can't go in and look what Atlanta did last week and say, oh, yeah, like this. They've got this one.
They have talented players.
It's a battle-tested team. It's a team that's been there. So
Matt Ryan last year, by the way, for a team that was 7-9, by the way, his worst record as a starting quarterback in all his years in the league.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah,
had a ridiculously good year that was overlooked because they were 7-9.
Right.
I mean, last year Matt Ryan threw for just about 5,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, and only 7 picks.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's.
And I hate using numbers,
but it's an impressive
the numbers
group.
Say something about the kind of year he had.
I agree. Well, Greg, excited to dig into the tape this weekend, and we'll get you back here next Monday night to talk through hopefully what's another Eagles win.
All right, sounds good, Fran.
Great stuff from Greg, and you can follow him on Twitter just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce here at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And you know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on any form of social media. That's one way to support the show. But the other way, the best way, my favorite way, is to go into Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever podcasts can be found, wherever you listen, and just give us a rating. It could be 5-star. That'd be nice of you. Give us a 5-star rating. Leave us a comment. Tell us if you like the show, what you want us to improve on, a segment you'd like to see done, a question you'd like answered. We've got a couple of those here today. So anything that you want, go leave us a comment. And that's just, not only does it help us and make the show better, but also boosts us up the rankings a little bit, makes us a little bit more visible to other fans that are looking for similar kinds of shows. So really appreciate anybody that's able to do that. And like I said, a couple of comments here today from our Apple Podcast page. First off, Card Fan 2018 left a 5-star review saying how much they love the podcast, love hearing Greg back on the program. Really appreciate you listening in and leaving that comment, Card Fan. Thanks so much for the feedback. Next question, River DDT. Loved the Week 1 preview of Washington, and the big question that they've got, this was before the game on Sunday, so leading in, do you think that the Eagles will come out fast, or will they struggle since so many players did not play in the preseason? How many weeks will it take for them to get up to full speed? In the past, I think the rule of thumb was 4 weeks. What is it now? And River, I think that's a good question. And look, the Eagles did not start fast in this game, obviously on either side of the football, but this would be my counter argument to whether or not it's about the preseason. Look, on defense, that unit played a good chunk of the preseason. I would say the traditional amount of snaps of what you would expect in preseason. I've got a couple series, a series or two in that first game, maybe about the first quarter, a little bit less in the second game, and then close to the first half in the third game, in the dress rehearsal, quote unquote. So, defensively, you had missed tackles, you had some coverages where, some big plays happened down the field. So while it didn't start fast on offense, where not as many of the starters played, you could say the same on defense. So I don't think it's a preseason thing. I think around the NFL, you look at it right now, teams, the Thursday Night Football last week, Green Bay and Chicago, it was great to have football back. Wasn't exactly the cleanest game from an offensive standpoint. Usually what happens is defenses are ahead of offenses this time of year. It does take teams a little bit of time to kind of get into the swing of things, especially with live action when the games really mean something. I wouldn't put anything into it from a preseason standpoint. I think ultimately it's just everybody kind of getting back into the speed of things and getting into where they feel like not necessarily in game shape, but just getting back to game speed and what they expect from regular season action. So really good question there. Really appreciate the feedback as always from Card Fan and from River and all of you out there for listening and all of your continued support of this show and all of our podcast offerings on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. All right, I told you we would go into my scouting notes on Tack McKinley, a former first-round pick out of UCLA for the Atlanta Falcons. Let's get to that now in our scouting report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the scouting report.
All right, so Tack McKinley, this was a guy that I really liked, and this was the 2017 NFL Draft. This was the draft that was held here in Philadelphia. The Eagles had selected Dirk Burnett earlier in the first round. A little bit later, Tack McKinley goes off the board. I had Burnett personally a couple slots ahead of McKinley, but I still liked McKinley, and we'll get into my notes now here. Just some of the kind of the Cliff Notes version. 2-year starter for UCLA. He played there for Tom Bradley. If you're a regional fan that live in the area, you may be aware of Tom Bradley. He was a longtime defensive coordinator at Penn State. He left and went to UCLA and now is not there anymore, obviously, with Chip Kelly being the head coach, but was there under Tom Bradley, a 2-year starter. He was a first-team All Pac-12 player his final season there, finished second in the conference in sacks. this is a guy that really, I just love the way he plays, and I'll just get into how he was used. Lined up primarily off the right side, played both out of a 2 and 3 point stance, did slide inside a little bit, so had some positional versatility, which I liked, was used in a lot of different ways. Very good athlete. You saw that on film. His play speed jumped off the tape when you watched him. All the physical traits you looked for in a pass rusher. Quality burst, quickness, change of direction, flexibility, balance. He was capable of winning off the snap as a pass rusher, fired out of his stance, and he got into the backfield quickly. I just love, he had explosive traits, and that was one of the things that really stood out to me was that, this guy can get from point A to point B in a hurry. As a pass rusher, his go-to move was his bull rush. That was definitely his bread and butter. Really kind of developed a knack for working speed to power rushes in his final season on campus, which was really good to see. I didn't see that his sophomore year, so to see it as a junior, I thought was really impressive. And then he worked in a couple of other moves. He had a double hand swipe. He had a rip move. He had a couple other things he worked on, but that bull rush, that was really his bread and butter, and that's how he made most of his money at UCLA as a pass rusher. Did a really good job attacking the throwing arm, typically arrived at the quarterback, very bad intentions, just a very violent, urgent player. When I saw that he was picked by the Falcons, it didn't shock me because he kind of fit that play personality of what they look for, especially on defense there with Dan Quinn. It really kind of fit their personality as a unit. Just a really fun player to watch. I liked that he never lost sight of the football. To me, that's a very underrated trait with defensive linemen or guys that aren't constantly searching for the ball and really have a knack of knowing, where not only where the football is, but also where the quarterback is. Don't get deeper than the quarterback. We always talk about that, having a defined plan as a pass rusher. He wasn't quite there in terms of his plan and in terms of attacking offensive linemen, but he at least always had a knack for being able to find the football and chase from behind, was constantly looking to make plays in pursuit, had a really high motor. Like I mentioned, the violence, the urgency, that showed up time and time again, week after week. For a guy that played hurt, and he had a shoulder injury that was revealed in the pre-draft process. He had played through, I believe it was for more than one season. I think he hurt it before his sophomore year. So for 2 years, he's playing with a bum shoulder and playing the way he was. I mean, that was really, really impressive to me and to other people. I know that, I had spoken with from around the league, his toughness that he showed, his competitiveness really shone through on the tape. And then also talking with him in person, a lot of people really wanted to root for this kid and everything. That, a lot of people knew his story, came from a pretty rough upbringing. So there was a lot to root for with Tack Mckinley. Held up fairly well against the run. He did a good job from a technique standpoint with his hands, understanding how to drop his weight. Again, competed at the point of attack, even dropped in coverage at times. So you're talking about a guy that had position versatility. He had scheme versatility. You liked the personality. A lot to like there. But overall, a very raw player because he wasn't a polished pass rusher yet. I mentioned didn't have a really developed pass rush plan, so wasn't able to string multiple moves together. If an offensive lineman blocked him on his first rush, did he have the ability to counter and complement that? He didn't quite have that. If he didn't win off the ball, he wasn't going to win late unless it was through pure effort. And that was one of my big knocks, was that not a lot of his sacks came off of skill or strength or speed. A lot of it were high effort plays, which is great. But in terms of guys that you're going to say, all right, like how does he win? That can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So that was one of the big knocks. I wanted to see him get a little bit bigger and stronger. He didn't have the ability to consistently collapse, even though the bull rush was his go-to move. You didn't see it quite get a ton of pop, a ton of movement all the time on contact. So I wanted to see him get bigger and stronger, get better with his hands. But if you're talking about what can you teach and what can't you teach, he had those athletic traits. He had that competitive fire that you want to see. Now, okay, we can get him in the building. We can get him bigger. We can get him stronger. We can work with his hands. And I think ultimately when you look at him now, he's gotten better in terms of his strength. He certainly has got the ability to hold up at the point of attack. He's shown a little bit more pop on those speed to power rushes. I would say he still relies heavily on that bull rush. There are times where he's able to mix in different things from a pass rush standpoint, but overall a guy that really relies on just getting inside your pads and then I'm just going to outwork you. And so, that's the kind of player you're going to see here taking on the Eagles on Sunday night, whether he's coming from the right or left. We mentioned earlier with Greg, they've definitely changed some things up schematically on that Atlanta defensive front. So we're going to see Tack Mckinley in a lot of different techniques used in a lot of different ways, but that's really going to be the mentality that you're going to see from this kid. He's going to come at you with effort, he's going to come at you with fire, and he's going to come at you with a strong bull rush. That's going to be his plan of attack. I'd like to see him, just from a scouting perspective, I'd like to see him continue to develop some more pass rush moves and really kind of further that plan of attack along a little bit. He's now going to be in his fourth season, or his third season rather, so a guy that you'd like to see continue making that jump. But look, I wrote down in the end of my notes, wouldn't shock me if 5 years from now, if he was going to be the best pass rusher in that class. That's what I wrote with him coming out of UCLA, because he had those traits, things that you like to work with. He's clearly not there now, but just getting a little bit better. So that's how I feel about Tack McKinley. A disruptive Atlanta front, like I mentioned, a lot of pieces there that you have to worry about, but an interesting group taking on a very strong Eagles offensive line, a group that looked really good this past week against Washington. All right, that'll do it. A great week here. Greg Cosell was outstanding as always. Really appreciate all of you out there for listening. Thank you again. And again, the number one way, go give us a little bit of love. Look, we're almost tapped out with questions. So if you want a question answered, whether it's about this matchup or next week's matchup against Detroit or the week after that in Green Bay, just jump on, get ahead of the game, throw a question on there. We'll make sure to answer it here on the show, and we'll centralize it to that week's matchup. All right, that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.